Every night, when we lay our heads down to sleep, something profound and largely unseen occurs, a journey that extends far beyond the physical realm. According to Edgar Cayce, often referred to as the sleeping prophet, sleep is not merely a biological function of rest and repair. It is a deeply spiritual state during which the soul detaches from the physical body and enters dimensions that are not governed by waking logic or visible boundaries. In this disembodied state, Cayce emphasized, the soul becomes open, receptive, and if unguarded, vulnerable. It can be influenced by energies, entities, or thought forms from both the spiritual and psychic realms. These subtle interactions may manifest subtly in our waking lives as unexplained fatigue, mood swings, recurring negative thoughts, or even chronic emotional unease. This is precisely why Cayce taught the importance of establishing spiritual protection before sleep. His ritual, though simple in practice, is profoundly rooted in metaphysical understanding. It is not just a passive routine, but an intentional act of energetic alignment, protection, and sanctification of the sleep state. The idea is that by consciously preparing the body, mind, and spirit for rest, one can seal the auric field, invite divine guardianship, and prevent spiritual interference or dissonance. What makes this teaching so fascinating is Cayce's emphasis on the unseen. He spoke often of forces that operate just outside our perception, entities and influences we may not consciously notice, but which can deeply affect our spiritual equilibrium. And he was adamant, if the soul is unprotected during sleep, it can be drawn into energies not aligned with its highest purpose. This ritual, then, is more than spiritual hygiene. It's a sacred act of sovereignty. It's a daily opportunity to protect, purify, and realign with divine consciousness. Once one begins to grasp the magnitude of what unfolds beyond the threshold of consciousness, the notion of sleep transforms from a mundane necessity into a sacred portal. Edgar Cayce repeatedly emphasized in his readings that sleep is a divine interval, a window of opportunity when the soul is partially freed from the dense confines of the body and allowed to commune with higher planes. It is during these precious hours that the soul may access realms of guidance, healing, memory, and spiritual instruction that are typically veiled to the waking mind. Yet, this liberation is not without risk. With the body inert and the conscious mind subdued, the soul moves within subtler frequencies, where it becomes far more sensitive to both benevolent and malevolent currents. Cayce viewed the quality of sleep not just as a physical determinant of vitality, but as a spiritual barometer. The degree of peace or unrest experienced during sleep often mirrored the level of harmony or disharmony within one's inner life and energetic field. A person who drifted into slumber with unresolved tension, fear, or anger, Cayce warned, could magnetize lower vibrational influences during their nocturnal journey. On the other hand, a heart centered in prayer, forgiveness, and spiritual openness would find itself attuned to higher realms of consciousness, receiving strength, clarity, and even healing from angelic or divine sources. But these were not abstract ideas. In Cayce's view, the consequences of an unprotected sleep state could be far-reaching. He described situations in which individuals awoke feeling drained, disoriented, or emotionally disturbed, not because of dreams, but due to subtle spiritual intrusions encountered while their conscious defenses were dormant. In some cases, the psychic boundary was weakened to such a degree that energies from disincarnate entities or unresolved thought forms latched on, influencing behavior, mood, or health in the waking state. Cayce did not dramatize this risk, but he did not minimize it either. He believed that spiritual hygiene, especially before sleep, was not optional for those walking a conscious path. This is why Cayce insisted that how one enters sleep is as crucial as sleep itself. The soul's nightly journey, though natural and recurring, was sacred and should be treated with reverence. Just as the body is bathed before rest to remove dirt, the soul too requires preparation to cleanse the mind, center the emotions, and invoke protective forces that stand watch while consciousness slips into the unseen. Cayce's understanding of sleep as a sacred interval, it becomes vital to explore what specifically makes the soul vulnerable during this nightly retreat. From physical awareness, the moment the body surrenders to slumber, the conscious mind loosens its grip, and the soul, still tethered to the body by what Cayce referred to as the silver cord, begins to move beyond the earthly plane. This silvery energetic thread, which some ancient traditions also describe, maintains the vital link between the physical and non-physical selves. While the body lies still, the soul roams, observes, learns, or interacts with layers of spiritual and psychic reality that are veiled during waking life in this expanded state. Often described as astral travel or soul projection, the usual protective barriers maintained by consciousness are relaxed. Without intention or spiritual preparation, the soul may drift without clear direction or shielding, making it more susceptible to energetic interference. Cayce noted that during these moments, individuals can unknowingly attract vibrations, both positive and negative, from entities, memories, or spiritual environments that mirror their emotional and mental state at the time of sleep. Just as a tuning fork vibrates in sympathy with a nearby tone, so too does the soul resonate with the frequencies it encounters, especially when left ungrounded or emotionally conflicted. The psychic environment surrounding a sleeper plays a significant role as well. According to Cayce, thoughts are things, and the emotional residue left in a room can form an invisible atmosphere that either nourishes or destabilizes the auric field. In spiritually charged or psychically polluted spaces, the sleeper may absorb lingering impressions, unresolved energies, or even transient entities seeking expression or attachment. These are not always malicious forces, but their influence can be draining, confusing, or misaligned with the soul's path. Such vulnerability isn't cause for fear, but for awareness. Cayce's perspective encouraged reverence and responsibility. He did not propose paranoia, but rather mindfulness that the state of the heart and the space in which one sleeps are not passive factors, but essential ingredients in protecting the soul's journey. When recognized, this vulnerability becomes an invitation not just to guard, but to elevate, to consciously prepare the soul for sacred movement through unseen worlds. The soul's heightened sensitivity during sleep naturally leads to the question of how one might safeguard that vulnerability. Edgar Cayce's answer always returned to a central principle: intention. The state of one's consciousness just before falling asleep, he insisted, plays a defining role in what the soul encounters and how well it is protected during its nightly release from the physical form. He regarded the pre-sleep moment not as a trivial gap between activity and unconsciousness, but as a sacred threshold, a spiritual checkpoint that determines whether the soul moves into harmony or chaos. This is why Cayce so often urged individuals to become intentional participants in their own transition into sleep. He taught that the mind does not merely shut down when the body sleeps. Rather, it shifts its focus to subtler dimensions. Thoughts held in the final minutes before slumber form a bridge, carrying their energy into the astral realms. If the mind is clouded with resentment, anxiety, or mental noise, those unresolved energies become the filters through which the soul travels. In contrast, thoughts of peace, love, gratitude, and divine connection lift the soul toward clarity, protection, and insight. For this reason, Cayce recommended a form of spiritual hygiene as part of the nightly routine. This might include a brief prayer for guidance, an affirmation of light, or even a silent expression of forgiveness, clearing the emotional and mental field, so the soul enters rest in a state of alignment. It was not the complexity of the words that mattered, but the sincerity of the vibration behind them. Simple declarations such as, "Let thy will be done through me," or "Surround me with thy light," had the power, according to Cayce, to invite spiritual guardianship and create a subtle shield around the soul. In essence, these final waking thoughts serve as spiritual coordinates. They mark the starting point of the soul's nocturnal path and influence what kinds of energies it will meet. Through conscious intention, one prepares the inner atmosphere with as much care as the outer room, quieting the chaos within and calling forth the peace beyond. Once the role of intention has been acknowledged as central to the soul's nocturnal journey, the question naturally arises: how can this intention be anchored into a reliable, repeatable practice? Edgar Cayce offered not just philosophical insights, but also practical, step-by-step suggestions that together formed a nightly ritual designed to protect, uplift, and spiritually align the soul before sleep. These core elements were not random techniques, but components of a holistic process that fused spiritual principle with daily life, each playing a vital role in fortifying the energetic field and orienting the soul toward divine influence. The foundation of the ritual, and arguably the most emphasized element in Cayce's readings, is prayer. But for Cayce, prayer was not a formulaic recitation. It was a living connection to divine intelligence. Engaging in sincere prayer before bed invites not only divine presence, but also consciously realigns the sleeper with a higher vibrational current. This act serves as both invocation and orientation. It's a way of asking for protection, giving thanks, and reaffirming the soul's desire to be guided by spiritual laws. In the language of energy, prayer acts like a beacon. It emits a signal to unseen realms, inviting protective forces to draw near. Closely paired with prayer are affirmations, which Cayce described as mental attitudes wrapped in words. These statements, repeated either silently or aloud, imprint the subconscious with intention and clarity. Affirmations such as, "I am surrounded by divine light," or "only that which is of God may enter this space," act as spiritual programming, forming mental and emotional boundaries that help repel interference from lower or chaotic forces. These affirmations were meant to be short, consistent, and emotionally charged, not rote, but felt. From there, Cayce advised the use of visualization, a technique that bridges thought and subtle energy. He frequently recommended that individuals visualize a field of white or golden light surrounding their body or filling the room before they went to sleep. Some were encouraged to picture this light descending from above, like a column of divine presence, while others were guided to see it forming a dome or bubble around their bed. The point was to create a clear, energetic image that the soul could carry into the dream world, a visual imprint of divine protection. Visualization, according to Cayce, was more than imagination. It was a tool for shaping etheric structure. He also noted that the physical environment in which one sleeps contributes meaningfully to the soul's stability during sleep. Environmental preparation includes both the cleanliness and energetic harmony of the space. Clutter, dust, or disorder were not only distractions to the senses, but also impediments to energetic flow. He urged people to maintain a simple, clean, and harmonious sleeping space free of emotional residue, sharp conflicts, or disruptive vibrations. Regularly blessing or smudging the room, keeping sacred texts nearby, and removing emotionally charged items all contribute to the subtle cleanliness of the sleep environment. In addition to cleanliness, Cayce sometimes addressed more esoteric environmental factors, such as the direction in which one sleeps. He observed that the orientation of the body, particularly the head, could influence the vibrational currents one receives during sleep. He frequently recommended sleeping with the head pointing toward the north or east, noting that these directions align the body with magnetic and spiritual energies that encourage clarity, balance, and receptivity to higher guidance. Conversely, he warned that certain directions, such as sleeping with the head to the south, could produce disturbed sleep, mental agitation, or subtle spiritual unrest. These were not superstitions, but reflections of how subtle forces interact with the body's own energetic compass. Finally, Cayce acknowledged the symbolic power of objects and sacred items placed in the room or near the sleeping body. A cross, a Bible, a sacred symbol meaningful to the individual, each could serve as a point of focus and spiritual resonance. These objects were not talismans in a magical sense, but physical anchors for invisible realities. They reminded the subconscious mind of its divine roots and acted as silent witnesses to the intention behind the ritual. Cayce believed that such symbols, when used with reverence and awareness, helped concentrate spiritual energy and ward off disturbances. When practiced together, these elements form more than a checklist. They become a spiritual posture. They represent the soul's conscious cooperation with divine order. Rather than drifting aimlessly into sleep, the practitioner enters rest with direction, protection, and intention, transforming the night into sacred ground for healing, guidance, and peace. While Cayce's teachings emphasize spiritual intention and ritual, he was equally attentive to the more grounded, physical dimensions of sleep, especially the direction in which one positions the body. To many, this might seem like a minor detail, but to Cayce, sleep orientation was far from arbitrary. He consistently warned against sleeping with the head pointed south, explaining that such a position could invite disturbances on both the physical and spiritual levels. Instead, he recommended positioning the head toward the north or east, aligning the body with Earth's magnetic and energetic flow. This guidance resonates with ancient traditions that also recognize the subtle influence of directionality. In Vastu Shastra and certain schools of feng shui, sleeping with the head to the north is often discouraged, as it is believed to disrupt the natural alignment of energy channels and may even accelerate aging or spiritual dissonance. These traditions, like Cayce, suggest that orientation affects more than comfort. It influences the movement of prana or life force through the body, and the quality of rest and restoration one receives during sleep. Modern science, though often slower to engage with such esoteric views, has begun to offer intriguing parallels. Research into geomagnetic fields has shown that humans, like other biological organisms, are subtly affected by the Earth's magnetic polarity. Some studies suggest that sleeping along certain magnetic axes can influence melatonin production, circadian rhythms, and even brainwave coherence during REM sleep. Though these studies remain on the fringe of mainstream medical discourse, they point toward a convergence of ancient insight and contemporary investigation, both recognizing that the body is not isolated from its environment, but intimately woven into larger energetic systems. For Cayce, the underlying principle was always about harmony. Sleep direction was not about superstition, but resonance aligning the body to receive supportive energies and minimize disruptive ones. It was another way of honoring the sacredness of rest and ensuring the soul, already vulnerable in its nightly journey, was not pulled into chaotic currents due to physical misalignment. When seen this way, even something as subtle as the angle of a bed becomes a quiet but powerful act of spiritual protection. The deeper one explores Cayce's body of work. The more evident it becomes that his teachings were never purely theoretical. They were grounded in lived experience, hundreds of individual cases in which people sought help, not only for physical ailments, but also for unexplained emotional, psychological, and spiritual disturbances, many of which originated in the vulnerable hours of sleep. These documented readings provide a rich window into how subtle influences during rest could manifest in waking life, and how Cayce's recommended rituals brought resolution where conventional approaches had failed. One particularly compelling Case involved a woman who, despite maintaining an otherwise healthy lifestyle, reported frequent nightmares filled with dark imagery and emotional intensity. She often awoke feeling shaken, disoriented, and depleted, as though she had been through something real and exhausting. In one of her readings, Case explained that her soul was indeed traveling during sleep, but was entering realms not attuned to her spiritual growth. These dreamscapes were not simply the products of her subconscious. They were encounters with vibrational planes colored by fear and unresolved inner conflict. Case instructed her to begin each night with prayer and to visualize herself surrounded by a shield of white light. Within weeks, the nightmares diminished, replaced by peaceful dreams and a noticeable lift in her overall energy. Another case featured a man plagued by a persistent sense of fatigue despite adequate rest. He had no apparent physical illness, yet he woke up every day feeling drained. Case traced the issue to spiritual entanglements encountered during sleep. The man, Case revealed, was open to certain disincarnate entities, energetic remnants of others, who were attracted to his unresolved guilt and anxiety. These entities, while not malicious, were drawing energy from him during his nightly state of openness. Case advised him to cleanse his sleeping space, read a passage from the Psalms before bed, and place a Bible under his pillow as a point of divine resonance. Gradually, the exhaustion faded, and the man reported waking up with a sense of renewal he hadn't felt in years. In yet another reading, a child experiencing episodes of sleepwalking and night terrors was brought to Case's attention. The child would speak of visitors and lights in the room. Case interpreted this not as pathology, but as evidence of an unusually sensitive soul. He recommended that the parents conduct a simple nightly ritual with the child, involving gentle prayer, a brief affirmation of safety, and the placement of a small cross by the bedside. The disturbances lessened significantly, and the child began sleeping through the night, eventually describing dreams of angelic beings rather than fearsome figures. These stories are not meant to sensationalize, but to underscore a key message in Case's philosophy: what happens during sleep matters. The spiritual dimension of rest, if left unattended, can open one to unnecessary suffering, but with even modest application of intention and ritual, the soul can regain its strength, clarity, and alignment. The real value of any spiritual teaching lies in its ability to meet people where they are, not only in moments of crisis, but also amid the everyday patterns of life. The cases from Case's readings highlight the potency of his protective ritual, but to make it meaningful today, it must be both adaptable and sustainable in a modern context. Life today is often fast-paced and overstimulated, filled with screens, deadlines, and mental clutter, all of which can easily crowd out the quiet space needed for spiritual preparation. Yet Case's guidance remains deeply relevant precisely because it invites simplicity and presence, not complexity or dogma. Integrating the ritual into daily life begins by reclaiming the last moments of the evening as sacred. This does not require a drastic overhaul of one's lifestyle, but rather a shift in awareness. Instead of collapsing into bed at the end of a long day or scrolling through notifications until sleep takes over, one can begin by gently carving out even 5 to 10 minutes to create a threshold between the outer world and the inner. Dimming the lights, turning off electronics, and allowing the nervous system to settle are small but powerful acts of reverence. These quiet gestures signal to the subconscious that something meaningful is about to occur. From there, the elements of the ritual can be adapted to personal rhythm and belief. A short prayer, even a sentence spoken with sincerity, is enough to set spiritual intention. An affirmation whispered with genuine feeling can focus the mind and heart. Visualization doesn't require elaborate imagination. Simply picturing a cocoon of light or sensing peace descending is sufficient. If meditation is part of one's practice, Even a few minutes of stillness before bed can clear lingering mental debris and bring the soul into gentle alignment. For those with families, the ritual can become a shared practice especially beneficial. For children who are naturally sensitive to subtle energies, whether practiced in solitude or with loved ones, the key lies in consistency. Just as brushing teeth prepares the body for rest, this nightly moment of quiet prepares the soul. Over time, the act itself becomes a living field of protection, one that strengthens with each repetition as the ritual becomes a stable part of nightly life. Its effects begin to reach far beyond just protection from disturbance. The soul, once shielded consistently and guided with intention, starts to function more freely and fluidly in the unseen dimensions. Cayce's approach was never solely about defense. It was about alignment, bringing the soul into greater resonance with its higher purposes. When the nightly journey is no longer clouded by psychic interference or unconscious turmoil, the soul begins to receive what it is meant to: clarity, insight, healing, and direction. This manifests in a number of ways. One of the first and most noticeable is the change in dreams. Instead of chaotic or emotionally charged scenes, the individual often begins to experience dreams that carry symbolic depth, spiritual messages, or even prophetic glimpses. Cayce emphasized that dreams are the soul's language, and when the mind is clear and the soul protected, these messages come through with greater coherence. The dream state becomes not only more peaceful but also more useful, a tool for inner growth and understanding. Another subtle but profound benefit is an increase in intuitive perception. By guarding the soul during its most vulnerable and receptive hours, the spiritual senses sharpen. What once seemed like coincidence or vague feeling now takes on a new clarity. Decisions feel more guided, synchronicities more frequent, and emotional responses more grounded. This stability fosters a deeper emotional equilibrium during waking hours, less reactivity, more awareness, and a growing sense of inner harmony. Ultimately, Cayce's ritual supports the entire arc of soul evolution. Protecting the soul at night is an act of honoring its purpose to grow, to remember, and to serve. As this nightly practice deepens, the individual becomes not only more defended against lower influences but more connected to the higher guidance always available. This alignment fosters empowerment, integrity, and spiritual maturity qualities that ripple outward into every corner of life. As the threads of Cayce's teachings weave together, a clear message emerges. The time spent asleep is not idle, but sacred. To protect the soul during this period is not only wise, it is transformative. What begins as a simple ritual becomes a profound declaration of sovereignty, an act of devotion that nurtures clarity, peace, and spiritual strength. Cayce offered more than spiritual theory. He offered a map, one that guides the soul safely through its nightly passage and back into waking life renewed and aligned. Embracing this practice is an invitation to experience life differently. Night after night, the soul becomes less burdened, more illuminated. The boundaries between the visible and invisible grow softer, and intuition flows more freely. With each intentional step taken before rest, one reclaims inner power. In protecting the soul, we do not shrink from the unknown. We step consciously into its light.